Hey guys, I'm Matt Dunn, and here we're going behind the cage with Brett Makar. We're excited to have Brett on as an FCL athlete. Brett is one of the best defenders in college lacrosse right now. Just won a championship with the University of Maryland last year. And right now, we're going to pick Brett's brain a little bit on just how he thinks about covering the ball behind the cage. And really just kind of get a feel for what's going through his head, what his focus points are. He's, a multiple-time All-American, one of the best in the game right now. So really just getting a feel for what's going through his head. I'm excited to hear what he's thinking and also kind of pick his brain for you guys. So we're going to start off back behind the cage. And, Brett, from a start, is there anything kind of psychologically you think about when you're approaching the ball, like a mindset wise, anything that you found helpful or you do in particular as you're going to approach the ball?
Yeah, I think kind of just the biggest thing for me that I've learned playing at the next level is just preparation going into a game. So, any guy I would end up guarding on the field, I kind of already have an instinct or a little bit of background knowledge on some of the things they've done in the past, what kind of tendencies they have. So that's probably the first thing that comes into mind when approaching the ball, especially behind the goal. But the biggest thing is my approach. So many times when I'm watching film myself or other guys, you can really kind of understand why a guy got beat based off how his first approach was.
Awesome. And so as we go through that, we'll kind of go through a pretty common scenario a lot of guys behind the cage find themselves in. If you're a guy that covers the ball behind the cage, just a simple guy picks the ball up off the end line, runs out a shot, picks it up. Mm-hmm. You're getting dodged somewhere, in between the hashes directly behind the cage, right? Yeah. So let's talk about maybe how you're thinking about approaching that dodge, or maybe how that changes for different types of dodgers as well.
Yeah. So
we'll simulate it back here, right? Shot went out. I'm the ex-attackman here. Pick up the ball. Right, coming in. Now, what are you thinking about, right? Does it matter what you saw on film with me or what type of player I am or what's going through your head?
Yeah, so right off the bat, I would know which hand you are, what your strength is, your dominant hand, and that's how I would start my approach. So if you were as a righty, I would try and split your body down the middle with my right foot matching your right foot, right? So I'd be a left foot approach here, right? Because this would be my outside foot. So I always want my outside foot to be the one that's in front of my opposite foot. So if Coach Matt were to dodge me here, I knew he was a righty. I'm splitting him in half. And then the second thing for me is I'm always trying to stay on my toes. A lot of guys, when they have trouble changing direction, is they'll end up on their heels, right? So especially when you're trying to match speed, being on your heels is one of the worst things you could do because there's really no ability for you to match that same speed going this way, but also at the same time, if you're trying to plant, change direction, or take a good angle, it's really hard to do if you end up on your heels. So the biggest thing for me is no strength, approach the way I want to with my outside foot, kind of being my top foot, split Coach Matt down the middle. I know he's a righty, right? So I'm already kind of shading that strength. I'm not overcommitting and giving him a freeway towards the goal, but I'm kind of shading that strength just enough where if he tries to go that way, I could take it away easily, but also at the same time not giving him a freeway to his left. So. Okay,
so now you're shading my strong hand, you're getting your lead foot forward, and you're splitting my body in half. What are you thinking about with your stick? What are you thinking about with cushion, right? How much space do you want to give me? I picked the ball off the end line. I'm about 12 yards below GLE right now. What's going through your head for how you're using your stick and the cushion you're keeping between us?
Yeah, so the stick is also a big thing that could be advantageous for us, especially when you're in space, getting dodged from behind and the guy's able to get a run at you, or from the corners. You really don't want to make contact out here. Contact is not our friend, because if I were to overcommit, make contact, that would allow an offensive player to kind of make one move, and then he's already got a good angle getting towards the goal. So
if you were approaching me here, right, and we're kind of walking through this, I picked the ball off the end line, you got your stick out in front, you're splitting me in half, right, shading my right. As I start moving towards you, what are you kind of doing here?
I'm matching speed.
Matching speed?
If you're guarding a really fast guy, like if I was watching film all week and I knew, you like to get downhill fast, you're a fast guy, you like to use your speed to your advantage, I know that for me, the only way to kind of keep that cushion and keep that gap using my stick to my advantage is to match speed with how that guy is going, right? Especially if you're in the mind of an offensive player, they can only run at you for so long, right? Especially in a straight angle like this. At some point, they can't use the crease, they can't go into the crease. So at some point, they're gonna have to make that move, whether they split to their other hand or try and use a rocker, roll dodge, whatever it is. So knowing that I have the ability to match speed, especially when I'm in space this far out towards the goal, is something that I really try and keep in mind.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. And to that point, right, defenders always get confused about, hey, like if I keep backpedaling forever, I'm never going to make contact. I'm going to end up, above the cage.
Yeah.
But as an offensive player, like my job as an offensive player is I have to get around you and take a good angle to get to a dangerous spot. So think about from that lens too, right? I have to actually do something soon.
Yeah.
And what I want to do is eat up the space on you earlier so I can get around and turn you.
Exactly.
Right? So if we're going through this, Brett, you approach me, you're keeping that speed. Now, let's say out of this, I give you a hard jab and I split under, right? What are you kind of thinking right now to make sure you're continuing to contain me and play this well?
Yeah, so a tendency with a lot of guys when they make that first move is they swing, right? So, what is a great tool to use is this plant foot, this starting approach foot, is the one that you're going to drive off if a guy splits to the other hand, or vice versa, if he were to go to his right. You always want to drive, right? A lot of guys will swing their hips, like opening the gate in a sense, where you open your hips and you're not using that explosive drive that allows you to match speed and take a good angle. So if I were to, swing my hips, this is a lot less athletic and explosive, right, than using this drive foot. Right, so if Coach Matt were to make his move, to keep speed with him.
I love that, yeah. And that's one of the things, like a couple of the drills you just did, like a focal point of that is not only keeping cushion, but also you finished every rep, but there I noticed with a hard drive and plant off that right foot to go to the left. So I always tell a lot of D guys, like if you're looking to train footwork, being able to train getting back and moving laterally, but also driving hard out of that retreat step to break on a line with some power and speed.
No doubt, no doubt.
Now, so we don't swing, right? Don't want to swing, we want to be able to drive out of our breaks. Now, how do you think about not being too aggressive behind the cage, right? Because there's that balance. You want to be able to use your stick, put pressure on guys, but there's also the balance of you don't need to be too aggressive behind the cage where a guy can't shoot from.
Yeah.
Right? So if I'm doing that same dodge, right, where I'm coming at you in space and I split here, what are you thinking about, like fully kind of trying to jump on top of this versus like maintaining a little bit of a gap and reading this? Yeah,
so most guys, if they were to make a first move, they're usually trying to make that first move to set up for a second move. So a big thing, and like as defenders, I kind of always thought this before, I got to college was, we got to be aggressive. We want to beat up the ball. We want to make the attackman uncomfortable. And there's a time and place to do that. But when you're in space with a dodge behind the goal or from the corners, you really got to use patience and letting contact come to you to your advantage. Especially for me, I'm kind of, more of a physical defenseman. And, sometimes I even get into a rush to make contact, which, is not advantageous for me because that's when attackmen can kind of use that contact to make a second move off of. So for me, I need to know that I got to be more patient, especially when I'm in space, because I know that most times if a guy makes that first move, it's usually a setup to come back to a second move.
Great. So I like that. And now also, like, one thing I was always taught and kind of stick with is this concept like trailing guys to X a little bit, understanding you have a crease angle on that side, and also knowing that I'm a right-handed player here, right? So as I'm coming to dodge Brett here, moving out in space, I go to split, you're kind of thinking like, yeah, if I keep going this way, you've kept a good stick gap, you drove off it, you're kind of trailing on my back hip here, knowing that last drill we did where you can play that angle up there of me going to my offhand, right? And if I give you this hard, right, this hard split here, and I give you a quick roll back, you're still in a pretty good position to play that.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing you just did there well is by planting off your left foot to go right, you didn't have to cross that left leg over early. Right? Is that something you focus on too?
Yeah, for sure. I think anytime a guy makes that first move, and when I'm trailing specifically, that kind of goes hand in hand with being patient. But a lot of times as a defender, I kind of want to be in an attackman's back pocket. I never want to get, over pursuited or too aggressive where I lose my angle and allow them to kind of make a second move, which puts me at, a disadvantage to get back to the other side of the field or, take a good angle and defend the dodge. So I kind of always think in my head, like I want to be able to see the guy's jersey number from his backside. So if a guy's running like this, I want to know kind of what jersey number is this.
So if I'm coming at you here, right?
So if you were to go to split.
And I go to split to my left here.
I want to be able to see that jersey number. That's kind of a good tell for me if I'm trailing the right way.
Now here's the thing a lot of kids will say is like, oh, well, what happens if he just goes full speed that way, right? Like you're trailing by so much. What happens now if I'm I'm not setting you up for a rollback, and I just book it this way.
Yeah, so
right?
That's the thing is, it's being a half step behind.
Right.
So
okay.
If that gap were to get too big, then you're kind of just giving the guy a freeway and he'll be able to run to the goal. So it's balancing between being patient, but in the right way. So staying a half step behind, being able to see that jersey number, not overrunning the guy, but not giving him too much of a gap where he'll just be able to run towards GLE and get a shot off or draw a slide right away. Okay,
let's go through one like 50% here. I'm going to split, and you kind of maintain those keys, and we'll see how you play it as I get up to around GLE there.
For sure.
All right, so I'm coming at you. I'm here. Now I'm going, and then, okay, so as I start to turn the corner there, we talked about how you're going to trail me through X. What are you thinking now as I continue to accelerate and pick up speed right here? I noticed you did a good job, actually. I felt your stick right there the whole time, but I also felt like if I rolled back, you would have been sitting on it.
Yeah.
So you kind of maintain a presence here, but also in that disciplined position. So what are you thinking as I kind of get to this point and you see me start committing up here?
Yeah, I think I've seen with a lot of younger players or even guys kind of when they start out in college, they have a tendency to bring that stick back because they think to themselves, my stick's in the way, I can't run full speed to keep up with a guy, catch up to a guy. But really, keeping your stick down is your advantage, right? Because if you were looking to feed here, I could be in your hands. It's uncomfortable, you know?
Right.
But also at the same time, I can use this gap, and as you get towards GLE, you're naturally going to have to run up my stick if you want to take a good angle towards the goal.
Right.
And then eventually I'll make my contact after you run up my stick.
Right. So do you have an ideal like contact point you're thinking about as I'm turning the corner?
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, like I said, that contact's going to come naturally.
Right.
Like this is a point where
because I have to get up there, right? So if I keep going that way, you don't care.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You'll never make contact, but it doesn't matter because I'm not going to a dangerous area.
Exactly. And I think this is, you know, kind of a vulnerable point for defensemen too, especially ones that are more physical and like to get handsy.
Yeah.
Because if I try and make contact too early here, this is such an easy time for you to roll off, or my feet will stop and you'll be able to get to where you want to go. So that's the thing with patience too. Like that's one of the things I kind of keep harping on. Contact is a big patience point, right? Because if I don't have to make contact, if coach just keeps stepping away, that's fine. My stick's still on his hand. I can lift, get in his hands, and if he's a feeder, make him uncomfortable. And at the same time, if he's really trying to be aggressive and get towards GLE, that contact is just going to come naturally where he runs up my stick, and then I can be physical.
Love that. Okay, here's something that I don't even know if you know you do this really well, but as I'm coming up to make that contact, what are you thinking with like your body position, right? You've talked about letting contact come to you, absorbing it, drifting up the shaft into hands, but not getting too over your toes there.
Yeah.
So what are you thinking about with your body position as I go to make that contact, right?
Yeah, a lot of guys too, they think when, you know, someone gets to this point at GLE, they have to really use that punch almost like you're flat bench pressing, right? But really you kind of want to stay compact, like almost like an offensive lineman, you know, when they're pass protecting, you never see an offensive lineman fully extended out. A defensive lineman will get right past them and get to the quarterback. Same thing playing defense, right? If I were to get overextended when I made contact on Coach Matt, like I would fall right forward if he were to step away or roll off of it. So I'm trying to stay compact with my punch and let Coach Matt come up it naturally. And as we make that contact, I'm still here, right? My punch never really gets further outside than here. The most I'll ever punch really when I'm reaching is here, right? Because like I said, if I get too far out, I'll fall forward, won't be in that athletic position, and ultimately get beat.
And you're maintaining that posture, like your nose not coming down as much, right? You talk about pass block posture, like tight in here. Good. One thing I want to talk about now, and this is where guys get tripped up a little, is you're a righty. Now what happens if we do that same thing where I'm going to my right, right? Because you're kind of in a natural position here with your stick to the top side. If I'm coming across dodging to this side now, are you following a lot of those same principles, or what changes for you?
Yeah, for sure.
So if we even start the same thing from back here, right? So I'm coming, you're gonna split me, you know, shade, top shoulder, right foot forward, now stick in front. And if I come here now and I go here,
yeah, my stick is going to stay down, except instead before naturally I'm a righty, so that stick was kind of in front of Coach Matt. I'm keeping it in that back pocket the entire time. That's almost kind of my reference point to see how much space I should have between me and the offensive player. And also, it kind of gives me a good read on if the offensive player is getting too far away from me. It's kind of like a fishing rod in a sense, and you got the fish on the hook and you can't let it get too far away or you'll lose it.
I like that, fish on the hook, back pocket. That's good. All right, so now as I'm carrying through, right? And quick question, if I'm a righty here, would you still shade my top field shoulder, or would you shade my right side here? Or does it just depend on that guy's tendencies? Like, if you're like, he can't go left at all, then I'll shade over here, that type of thing?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the guy, like you said. Going into a game, I'll usually have, watched several games and seen several clips of them, and it's all based on tendencies. But what feels most comfortable to me is always being shaded to the outside, just because I feel more comfortable doing that. If a guy wants to continue to go behind towards the goal, that's where I feel more comfortable, opposed to him kind of letting him run up the hash and get towards that side of the field. I would rather kind of the guy get behind, keep trailing him. I know he's a righty, so he'll probably keep going in that direction, and that's when I can just wash him up the field.
Okay, cool. Let's do another same thing where we'll go like 50%. Kind of talk through that same scenario. So I'm dodging you back here. I'm going to come at you. You're going to keep a little space. I give you the split. You're planning and driving. You're trailing me through here, kind of back pocket. Now as I go to turn, right? What are you thinking here? As I just changed from kind of a flat break across to making my attack towards goal line extended. What's going through your head there? Yeah,
same thing. Kind of depends on the guy. If I know he's a feeder, right? Most likely, as soon as he kind of commits towards going that side of the goal, once we kind of get really close to GLE and I know he's a feeder, maybe I'll bring it over and try and get into those hands and be a pest that way. But if I know he's more aggressive and he's trying to get towards the goal, I'll stay trailing and let that contact, same thing, let him run up my stick and let that contact come naturally. Whether I chicken wing or if I want to go V-hold, if the guy's a quick shooter at GLE, I'll bring it over. So there's definitely...
And so you do both. You're depending on the guy, you bring your stick across, and then you kind of call it chicken winging, where you're not bringing the stick across, but you have to take away top side. Now that your stick's not naturally up, you kind of throw that bottom hand out here and get your hips around a little more.
Yeah, exactly.
You want to talk through that real quick as I come to kind of talk through both of those. So maybe you feel like you're in a good spot coming through. I'm coming around, and I'm going to turn the corner now, and you're in a pretty good spot body-wise, right? You're not trailing by too much, and you feel comfortable in that scenario, like chicken winging.
Yeah,
okay.
For sure.
Let's see that.
I think definitely on this side more. I almost kind of embrace contact on this side because I feel comfortable doing that chicken wing, and it's kind of just something I've continued to work on throughout the years. So if that kind of righty attackman gets to this point and they want to make contact, this is when I'll throw that kind of chicken wing out, let them get into my body and use it as kind of that drive, and naturally I'm still in that good position. If they want to take top side, I'm still in a good spot, and if they were to go to inside roll, I could just step towards the pipe and keep them going behind the goal.
Okay, yeah, I like the chicken wing.
Yeah.
Now, if say you're trailing by a little more, right? Say I'm a quicker guy, got a little separation from you, and I'm coming around now, and I'm coming around the goal, a little more trail, and that's where you bring your stick in front?
Then I'll go more towards.
So usually after we kind of cross this X point, right? You're probably not bringing it in front on this side of the cage much. So now, what are you thinking? You see this gap now. And you're still stick length away, so you're not panicking. Feeling pretty good. I turned the corner. What are you thinking as you kind of see me turn the corner right here?
So my first reference, especially if there's kind of this gap, and I know you're turning the corner or you'll be going to feed, is I try to aim for this spot in the armpit. Because if you get in here, this will really throw off, their balance. They'll have to take one hand. They'll take one hand off their stick, and end up with one hand on their stick, which they really can't get as much power on a shot or really feed as well with one hand on your stick. So if Coach Matt was getting towards GLE and he had that step on me, I'm going for this armpit, right? And then if he were to keep running, naturally he would just run up my stick, and then I'd be able to get into this full V hold.
Nice. And so I think that's great because at higher levels, dodgers are taught to bury and hide their hands, right? So you're not always going to see guys are called, hey, if you lift the bottom hand, they're not going to get a shot off. But the truth is, if I'm a good attackman, turn the corner here, you're not going to see that hand. But what I can't hide is this, and you know that for me to get a shot off, all of this has to come back, right? So that's what you're kind of playing off of. And then if I, once again, if I continue to go that way, you'll never get into the V hole because I won't come into you, but that's okay because you're okay with me going that way.
No doubt.
If I turn in, I'm coming right into your V hold.
Exactly.
Right. So as you get into the V hold, what are some tips as you kind of get into this V hold up here, right? So I'm coming up.
A lot of guys, you'll see as soon as they get into the V-hold, their feet stop. They get cement feet, and then an offensive player will run through their top hand and get towards the goal or draw a slide right away. So the biggest thing for me is once I get into that V-hold and that first contact kind of happens, right? It goes into that bang, but I'm also still keeping my feet running, right? I'll get into maybe a quick shuffle off that contact, but then as soon as that shuffle's over, I'm running full speed and matching the speed of the offensive player.
Or you think like, and I think for me, I like the same way you kind of explained it.
Yeah.
I like to use the V-hold because if you don't, I just feel like you're giving guys so much space.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get, it's hard to get topside to chicken wing here and topside that way.
Yeah.
Especially as you start playing guys that are a little more dynamic and go both ways. And I feel like with the V-hold, one important thing is making contact. Be like, not just like waiting there, but also like being able to use some physicality.
No
Do you
doubt.
kind of use your top arm in a certain way to drive guys also?
I think it's kind of my top arm almost, right, if it were to happen naturally. And then
So I come in like you're going to be strong.
It's almost like the
okay.
shoulder and this forearm combination.
Yeah.
And even it's never necessarily a thing where it's an all-out kind of just I'm turning the guy.
Right, right.
Because good players will use it right away.
Right.
Inside roll and shoot or whatever it is they like to do. So I kind of think of it as like it's not an all-out thing. If the guy gets into my V-hold and keeps going up the field, that's fine too. And then if he inside rolls once I'm sitting down and if he does do it, then I also can take a good angle towards the pipe. But it's never like a thing where I'm using my stick to kind of
like hook the guy back. You're controlling this like kind of arm and leverage point we talked about, and then you're just using your keeping your feet going. Taking away my ability to turn, but also if I roll back, you're in a pretty good spot to give me a pop and play me down the line.
No doubt.
Nice. Well, that was a lot, and I think that was pretty awesome. I mean, that's cool. I think all the things you said, like I learned a few new things just the way you think about it. But yeah, I mean, that's freaking great. Anything else you have for thoughts on playing the ball behind the cage or playing on ball?
No, just be patient, have an understanding of the player you're guarding. I think even as a young guy, one thing I wish I kind of pay attention to more is when you're walking out on the field, usually whatever hand the guy has a stick in, that'll be his strength. So if you're playing at an event or in a high school game and you don't have a scouting report, I watch a ton of film on the guy you're covering. Usually whichever hand he has a stick in walking around the field or in warm-ups will probably be the hand that's his strength.
Awesome, guys. So that's all we got. I'm Matt Dunn. This is Brett Makar. We just did Behind the Cage with Brett Makar. And thanks for tuning in. Subscribe to First Class Lacrosse for more content like this.